Good evening, everyone. We will officially call to order this workshop for Manvel City Council, March 11th, 2024 at 5:03 p.m. We have 5 of 7 members present. Councilwoman Sarmiento and Councilman Perry are not going to be here tonight with it being spring break and having kids. They are not able to make it. My family and I, we homeschool our family, so you could either say we're always on spring break or we're never on spring break. One of the two. I'm stealing that from Dan Johnson. He said that earlier, so give credit where it's due. So we now have a presentation. I'll read off the presentation, then I believe either Dan or Brooke will be turning this over to one of you two. It's a presentation and discussion on the Manvel strategic and long-range planning processes and initial priorities facilitated by Gary Mitchell and Jennifer Mack, Keating Keast Collaborative. Team?
Hi, yes. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this is kind of what we discussed, I think, a couple of weeks ago, where we're kicking off our strategic, comprehensive, and thoroughfare plans. And this is sort of an informal big picture workshop where we're trying to nail down the goals of the council so that we can incorporate them into the plan as we move forward. And I think we have our presentation here from Gary. Jennifer's there in the back, so I'll just hand it over to them.
Awesome. Gary, thank you for being here. And I do just want to make mention, we do have a few PD&Z members and MEDC members that are here tonight. Appreciate you guys being here and listening in, as well as some city employees as well. So appreciate you guys. Gary, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you. Mayor, council members, appreciate the time. And I know you have a next meeting for the Planning Development Zoning Commission, so we have a time limit. But we do usually try to keep this to about an hour, this first workshop. It's partly so you get to know us a little bit more, and so we get to know you. We do have a couple of places along the way where we're going to ask you for some thoughts on a couple of things, but the rest of the way, we've got some information for you, tell you how this process is likely to unfold, and so we'll take it from there. And let's see. So some more about us. When I was here for our contract approval, gave you some background, but once again, we've been at this since the early 80s. We work across the country as indicated by that map, but we're based in Sugar Land. So we do a lot of work here in the Houston area and in Texas, but deal with a lot of different types of cities that are growing, as I mentioned last time, and cities that maybe haven't been growing as much. But whether it's on the left, dealing with cities at a very big picture level, as we will through your strategic plan effort or a visioning effort, and then comprehensive plans looking down the road several decades at how a city's growth and development may unfold. And then in our case, we happen to do a fair amount of development regulations work. So then based on a citywide plan, how does that translate into how things play out on the ground? But then we also do various types of specialty planning, from parks to downtowns, housing plans, looking at particular areas of a city, corridors, for example. Waterfront, we don't have to deal with that here as long as the water doesn't rise, but down the coast, we've done things like that. So bring that type of work as well. And here's just a laundry list of hopefully a lot of familiar names across Texas that we've worked with. So as I say, a lot of variety and different sizes, but we did Pearland's comprehensive plan in 2015 when Pearland was growing like crazy. That's tapered down a bit. And going back a little bit, we did a strategic plan for Kemah as another example. So that was actually right after Hurricane Ike. So taking stock of what do you do after a disaster like that? Where do we go from here? What are our big picture priorities, especially when there was some disaster money in play? So based on that, I also want to highlight our work with the city of Fulshear on the west side of the metro area in recent years, actually going back to 2011 when they had 1,500 people, and they're more in the 20, 30,000 range now of growth. So similar scenario in a lot of ways, as we've discussed with staff. This actually is their thoroughfare plan map that we've updated several times over the years, and then putting that thoroughfare plan on top of a future land use plan. So between that and infrastructure, parks planning, all these different pieces, how that all really sets a direction for your community. The other thing I'll emphasize before we move forward is I have a feeling the word character is probably used occasionally in Manvel with the way this area is changing, and that's something we bring as well. We really emphasize defining what character means, because the term character gets tossed around in zoning discussions, and people talk about maybe the character of their neighborhood is going to be affected or the character of a downtown. So our company leadership, our founders, actually wrote a pair of books just on this subject. So we really think about this a lot, and this spectrum from the most natural green areas, then into rural areas, and how that's different from suburban development, and then, of course, downtown areas, much more densely developed, much more about concrete and buildings, and less about green. So we think along that spectrum. So what we're after tonight is to orient you to where we're headed in the months ahead. We'll give you some context for our work ahead. And then, as I say, we want to talk to you about some initial priorities for this process. So at a very high level, here's where we're going in terms of timeline. We got started with a kickoff meeting with staff in February, so this is our first workshop tonight with council. We like to do this first thing before we certainly go out to your constituents and to the community and your different stakeholders, commercial business and residents. But then we are working with Brooke especially to lay out that plan for a series of outreach activities in the coming couple of months. And then as we get into the beginning of summer, we'll really start to do our work on where you are today as a community. The Manvel Today report is what results from that. And we'll tie the community input to that. There's a survey that's planned as part of that process. When we come back to you for a second time, that's in the summer time frame, early summer. We call that the plan direction phase because we're going to lay out for you based on everything we've heard from your constituents, from the community, based on the data, putting all this together, what we think the plans, and I say plans plural, of course, in this case, what they need to focus on because we're talking about strategic plan, big picture direction, comprehensive plan, and then thoroughfare plan update. So as we did the scope with staff, we really thought this would be a good place to bring forward the strategic plan kind of at this midpoint in the process, present that to you, see if you're comfortable voting on that, because that would really set the tone for all the rest of our work, because comprehensive plans are kind of a next step level down of additional detail plus thoroughfare planning, of course. Based on that phase, we would go into the rest of the summer, into the fall months on the future part of the plan, the future Manvel phase. That's assuming that the strategic plan is adopted already at that point, focusing in on the comprehensive plan, the thoroughfare plan, and all the components that go with that. Additional rounds of engagement as we talk about future possibilities for the community. And then when we get toward the end of this calendar year and into the early part of next year, really getting into the implementation part of this process. What are the actions next 6 months, next 6 years, next 10, 20 years as we look ahead, things for you to focus on as a community based on these plans. We typically take the draft plans out to an open house at that stage. I understand there's some great church spaces, for example, where we can do that, where you've done meetings like that before. But before we get to those formal public hearings where we're in this room, and it's more of a formal atmosphere. But before the Planning, Development, and Zoning Commission typically would look at those plans, hold a public hearing, recommend to council, and then council hold its own hearings and consider adoption. So we're looking at that for early next year. We'll see how it plays out. I've heard, like the legislature, I've heard these processes compared to sausage making. So we'll see how everything comes together and where we are as we get toward the latter part of this year. So these processes, especially a strategic plan, but also a comprehensive plan, is really stepping back from the day-to-day, but also geographically, not putting on the blinders just at your city limits and ETJ boundary, but looking at the area around you, this entire metro region, and how you fit into it and how it affects you down the road. This one slide sums up a lot of things about our philosophy, but as I say, stepping back from the day-to-day, number one, and at the bottom, preparing for change. As I say, in some places, there's not a lot of change happening. Change is here every day, as we know. Number two is changing the equation. And on the other side, with number two, we talk about, as businesses do, what are your assets? What are your liabilities? How do we build on those assets? How do we overcome or change, make liabilities into strengths? Number three is take control. This is your future, setting your own priorities, where you want to go in the future. Number four is let it be known. That's another important purpose of these types of plans is what are your intentions as a city? Capital investments, your zoning regulations, what do you want to convey to your constituents, to the development community, to potential investors. Where are we headed as a community? And join us for that ride. And at the bottom, of course, well, let me talk about off to the left. It's like I say, it's where do you want to be versus where you may be headed on current trends. And a thing that we really emphasize is we'll talk about all kinds of subjects, but among all those, what do you control? And what can you maybe influence in some ways? And then there's the things that you really don't control, but you've got to deal with them or work around them. And on the right side, there's our strategic plan. What are strategic things that you can do, which is partly an economic concept, limited resources, limited time to get to the outcomes that you want. And of course, down at the bottom is our classic line, you make a plan, work the plan, revisit the plan. Manvel knows how to do that. You've been doing this whole array of plans in the past. So this is another round at a next stage of growth and where you're headed. This is my ultimate mentor, one of my professors in graduate school, and this is his way of summing up planning. And another way to say that is don't just fly by the seat of your pants. You can control some outcomes. You can influence a lot of outcomes. So don't just leave it to chance. That's why we do these plans, and then we work the plans to get to where we're hoping to be. So we are not going all the way back to the beginning, but we did want to take a moment here and talk about looking back before we look ahead. And, even just the last time plans like this were done in the 2015 timeframe and in recent years. But if you want to go back farther than that, I'm always curious things that we know there's a lot of things that are different about Manvel just in recent years. What are some things that strike you as haven't changed much, that Manvel's still the same in certain ways? And if I may, Mayor, I'd like to open this up for anybody's discussion on council.
Appreciate that, Gary. I'd like to first turn it over to either Councilman Acree or Councilman Oplager, because they've been here some of the longest.
All right, I'll do it. Well, pretty much everything on the east side of Masters is almost the same.
Yes.
And my first time in council was in the 1980s. And of course, we knew that the development would be to the west, which it is, because that was all the open property. Eventually, as things fill up, they'll start moving back to the other side. Of course, it's oil fields over there. A lot of obstacles that has to be corrected. And but pretty much all we did was talk about what we expect to happen, which is happening. Manvel has a lot of obstacles in its way for drainage.
Yep.
GCWA Canal, the railroad, and of course, most of the drainage, almost all of it goes south. And but as we move to today, we've managed to overcome a lot of that, except we do have some problem with Highway 6 flooding a few times. So, but we have a project we hope will correct that if we can get to that point. But when I moved here, Highway 6 was 2-lane. Even I think the light was even yellow blinking. When we finally got a red blinking light, well, that was a big deal.
Can I ask when that was?
Huh?
When that was that you moved to?
76.
76, okay.
Yeah. So, I feel like the pioneer today. All the people I knew back then have passed away. So, but I was in the fire department, still am. We were pretty antiquated, but, that was life then.
Right.
So, but I don't know, Harry, you got anything to add to all that? You live on the other side. You live in that rural side.
How do you follow that?
Well,
Manvel, to me, it's still a lot the same, right? We still have, like you said, the older part of our neighborhoods. That's really, asphalt, asphalt roads, open ditches, well and septic, and that's never going to change, right? That's to me, that's still the draw to what makes Manvel our identity, is that we will always have that rural look and feel, right? No matter how the city grows that way, we're still going to have that over here, where you could have an arena and rope cattle, and that will never change. So.
Any other councilmen?
When I moved out here, which is I bought some land over 20 years ago, and I had plans to retire. So I bought the land and got the financing together, and lo and behold, built a house. I enjoyed the quaintness, open air. That was me. I wanted to relax and do my little thing, whatever it was going to be. But I've seen it grow, and there's a big difference in thinking from the so-called rural, semi-rural, and subdivisions, which is understandable. But the thing is, how do you balance that, the two, without people feeling they are being deprived of their rights, so to speak? I hear a lot of people say, well, I've moved out here and this is what I want to do. We want trails, but a lot of times you can't get those things because it's other people that own the land and they know what they want to do with their land. So it's going to be not a hard nut to crack, but hopefully people won't be stuck on their, okay, I'm not going to do this, and won't listen. And a lot of folks, they don't vote. I'm up here, and the rest of the guys, they can tell you that it's hard to get out. People talk to you and tell you their problems, but in terms of coming out and voting and going that particular way. But my thing is, I would like to see the new Manvel. We talk about all the time, what do people want? But you have a new generation, and a lot of times they don't want what people want in a rural area. I'm content sitting on my front porch and cutting my grass and all that good stuff, but you have a new generation that they don't want that. They want to go to work, come back, relax, cut their grass and drink a cold one. And I've been around and talked to a lot of them when I was campaigning and so forth. And it could be done. I think having, we got about 12, 15 new subdivisions, but they identify with the subdivisions only. They don't identify with the city of Manvel. What I would like to see is put something in place so the city of Manvel would be the focus point. When we talk about the acres we have, 160 acres, what can we do with that to bring in, they can feel connected to that? That's what I'm looking at. And hopefully it could be done. I would push for it if we could put that in the grinder, and that is what I would like to see. And eventually we're going to have a new city hall, because we have something like 100 people working here. That's going to double. And where are you going to put them at? This building can be used for something. I leave that up to the bigwigs. But the thing is, I would like to see something where the whole population of Manvel will say, okay, that's Manvel proper, so to speak, downtown or whatever you want to call it. But it could be done. It's just a point if we have enough people open to that concept. Because, a lot of folks just say what they want, but they won't push against it if we come up with a plan that would deal with the future. A lot of times, change is very scary. And I could see that in some talking to people. They're going to go to church, come home, Easter baskets and eggs. They love that. A little small carnival, but the large part of things, bringing all these new subdivisions together. This is one of the most richest counties in the state of Texas, Manvel. What's the medium, something like 90-something thousand? That's a nice, people enjoy it out here. But to find that happy medium, and there'll never be a utopia, it'll never be perfect. But if we can find that where all the subdivisions come together, because there's more folks in the subdivision than there is across the tracks. That's where I stay. So that's what I like to see. It's not. I'm not trying to get deep or anything, but that's what I would like to see. The 15 subdivisions come together. If they had some kind of big functions, that's where they have to go, instead of trying to go to their own little subdivision area, you know, so, and then they could truly meet their neighbors. Because right now, they only stay in their little particular area, which is, I don't have any problem with that, but you still have to have something that would bring the whole city of Manvel together and say, well, I'm a person from Manvel instead of person from the particular subdivision. So that's, yeah.
Absolutely. Councilman Lands?
Well, I'd like to just continue with what our councilman said, is that I wish we had a historic downtown area, and we don't. So that's unfortunate. But going forward, moving possibly the 160 acres, doing a town center, I think that would be our draw. As far as history, like these two gentlemen have, I don't have that much history with Manvel, other than the fact that the property that my wife and I live on, my wife's had it for about 17 years now. And several years ago, we came and spoke before council, previous council, about our concerns with the existing thoroughfare plan at that time, because they had a proposal in the thoroughfare plan to make our road a thoroughfare. And we have about 23 oaks that were planted in 1919 along the front of our road. And we have labeled them Manvel's historic trees, and we do a tree event every Veterans Day. This year will be our 6th, in honor of the trees and the planting of them after the Armistice Day by the people who owned the property. They were the Pattersons. It's Patterson Road. So we're very conscientious about the history of the trees and keeping them, not letting that go away, because the thoroughfare plan would have just wiped out the trees, along with a few more homes along Patterson. So that's one of the reasons I ran for council, because I wanted to see a new thoroughfare plan in place. And hopefully that we keep in mind not only our trees, but other historic trees, old oak trees in Manvel proper that we need to preserve and do our best to work around them.
I appreciate that example, Councilmember, because as I say, things you control, things you value, and making things work together. So great example.
And what I would say, Gary, to go back to your question, ways that it's the same. So my family and I, we moved to Manvel in 2017. And what attracted us to Manvel is it was close to some of the amenities of Pearland, but it was a lower cost of living. We could afford to buy our first home in Manvel. And as I've gotten to spend time talking with, the Booth family, with Mayor Martin, with Harry, Larry, Jerome, and others, Tammy, Bobby, people who have been around here for a very long time, what I've seen is ways that it's the same as it's the integrity, and it's the drive, and it's the passion of the people that call Manvel home. As I talk to people that live in new subdivisions like Terra Estates and Newport, and then the people who live south of the tracks, they all want the same thing. They all really moved here for the same reason. It's a piece of heaven is what I've heard people refer to it as, is it's close to Houston, but it ain't too close. Right. And that's nice. And I think that's something that we need to protect. And the way that we do that is through establishing our identity. That's the one thing that Manvel lacks. And Councilman Hudson said it exactly. We hear people say that they live in Pomona, or they live in Blue Water, they live in Lakeland, not that they live in Manvel. And the reason why I think we don't have as many people that come out and vote on a regular basis is because they don't identify with the city. They identify with the county, they identify with Houston, but they struggle to identify with the city. And I think the way that all of us in this room, those in attendance and those that are sitting here, the way that we leave our mark on this city is establishing that identity that my kids, when they grow up, even they can connect with. And that's, at the end of this, if there's anything that we accomplish in these plans, it's that. It's what are we leaving behind for future generations to pick up, and what is that identity that has knit people together, whether you've lived here your whole life or you just moved here yesterday.
Perfect. You're going to hear us say a few times, you you're at the leading edge of what many other communities have been through in this growth process. So you're not alone. There's plenty of examples out there to look at, but do it your way. All right, let me, on that second item on the list, we will get much of that from our discussion with staff and just from doing our work and seeing your past documents, things that you've checked off and have gotten done. But I'd like to ask this question at the council level. And maybe just for our time, if you got one or two that stand out to you as things that, not just the city, not just city government, but as a community, things you've gotten done in recent years that you're really proud of. And the reason I bring this out is we like to highlight that in our plans, that here's what got done based on previous planning. Here's now what we're setting out to do based on these new plans. So things that are accomplishments.
Absolutely. One question, Bobby, Dan, are we able to engage the audience in this conversation, or this kind of has to stay more so just for council right now?
Well, Mayor, for anything, any meeting at all, it's up to the chair, the presiding officer, which is you, to solicit any comment or recognize anybody that wants to be recognized. But typically, the workshops are for council to freely talk without having to make decisions. It's more like an idea or, discussion kind of thing. But
Okay.
you can solicit if you want.
So what we might do then is at the end, if we have time left over, maybe open it up, because you have MEDC members and PD&Z members that are here. It might be an opportunity for them to speak. One big accomplishment is HEB. It's a grocery store that's coming. There used to be Pick and Pack where a Bighorn is located, and whenever that closed, people wanted a grocery store. So I would say maybe a way to summarize it is the fact that people can start to keep their dollars in the community that they call home and not have to go elsewhere is a very big accomplishment.
I dropped some of mine there already, so.
Thank
and I'm
you.
a visitor.
Appreciate that. I know we saw it flow into our bank account. So
There you go.
thank you. Council, what about for you guys? I know one for Councilman Acree would be the acquisition of our 117 acres regional drainage facility, Acree Lake. I think securing that land to mitigate some of the drainage concerns that we have, especially Highway 6 is an emergency evacuation route. Something that Councilman Hudson said was the 160 acres, the acquisition of that land, because that really allows us, it's a clean slate that we can really leverage that, not, in my opinion, not just do a bunch of ball fields that nobody can use unless you're a part of a sports team, but something that really brings the community together.
And Mayor, on that point, I'll just mention, I see that as still on the agenda item, what the plan will be going forward, which will certainly be part of this discussion.
Correct. And I think something, as I've talked with Councilman Oplager, it's some of the protection of the rural nature that, you see a lot of the growth that's coming on 288, which is good, but there's still some of, the reason why him and his family decided to call it home. There's been the nurturing of that over time as well. So those are just kind of in conversations that we've had over the past few months. Those are some things that I've picked up on, fence permit requirements for councilman lands. And, there's some of the bigger picture things, but I think it's sometimes the smallest details that make the biggest difference.
For me, quality development, the fact that there is a new Manvel and that there is that side of town, it's being done well. It's attractive. So that's a feather in the cap. And based on ordinances and in some cases, development agreements, just working with the private side.
What I would also add, Gary, would be it's the culture here at City Hall is something that's very important to me. I think hiring Dan as our city manager and getting some of the key people in the key positions. I believe in the 4 Ps. You got to have the right people in the right positions, following the right process to produce the right product. And I think we've taken care of those first 2 Ps, where we're starting to get the right people in the right positions. Now we're focusing on processes. And as a community and council, if we can come together to equip our employees to be successful with the processes, with what this is, that target to hit, we're all successful because of that.
Let me move along so we can reserve some time at the end. And I'll just mention, we'll be meeting with these groups along the way. So we'll have those opportunities to talk deeper at a later point. But as we start this process, these are some things that we figure and know are on the agenda as far as and we use the word context. As we get deeper into the details, certainly we're talking about growth management, how to handle growth, how to direct it as best we can with the tools we have in Texas. There's the rural character preservation aspect that however your community grows in the future, that's still part of the mix, that's there. We know in this part of the world and in recent years, dealing with and avoiding flooding is certainly top of agenda typically for public and for local government. We'll certainly be looking at the economic aspects, what's going to drive this area in the future, balanced tax base, those types of considerations. But quality of place for your residents, for visitors, is certainly in the mix. And then tied to the thoroughfare plan, but in general, that we start to think about at this early stage of growth, how are people going to get around? What are those options, safety, and working within the boundaries, as mentioned, of maybe not here, this isn't the place that's going to work, but how do we make connections? Connectivity is a big theme in most of these types of processes with communities. Let me put a few numbers out there. This is just scratching the surface, but as an example of some of the facts and figures we'll bring to you. And we look to pick numbers that start to go with the story that we're hearing from the community. So just as a starting point, when we're talking about places changing and adding population, if you go back to the 2010 census, and this is for the city limits, since these are city numbers, and we know that those city limits and ETJ boundaries change over time, but as of 2010, the population density in the city of Manvel, and that's just take all your people, divide it by the square miles, the land, it was 220.3. 10 years later, in the 2020 census, it was up to 364. Along the bottom, we put some comparison numbers just for some nearby communities, since you're familiar with them, and you see the range. And that, these are average numbers because you're spreading it across a large landscape here in Manvel, but there are certainly going to be pockets, your newer subdivisions, and now even maybe some multifamily development where people are living much closer, but then there's places where people are very spread out. So this is an average number, but it's one number that starts to tell a story of how are people going to live in Manvel in the future? What's the distribution going to be? Implications for your public services, for traffic, for parks, all these pieces. And that's, fairly high number for Pearland. They certainly were not there 20 years ago. So that's the trajectory that can happen with growth in certain areas of your city. Median age. We always look at this, of course, as a starting point. We'll dig deeper into what's the distribution of your ages, from the youngest kids to the most senior. And what's interesting to me about these numbers, the number on the left is actually going back to the 2000 census. Interesting there that, this was back then before the baby boom retirement wave had started. A lot of communities that we worked with were around 30, low 30s of median age. So that reflects where you were 20 years ago, a more rural community, more older population typically. But now as we come forward to the latest estimate for 2022, down to 35.7, across the country and most cities, the median age is just going up dramatically because that baby boom retirement wave is coming through the system. And so we're working with plenty of cities right now where the median age is well over 40. Sugar Land right now is in the mid-40s, I believe, at median age. So on both sides, you've kind of bucked that trend. And, typically, as you're getting subdivisions, families, younger kids, schools being built, your median age is going to come down. So as I say, you're kind of counter trend right now, which is fine. But it has, as we say, everything is about implications for planning and for services. Again, across the bottom are some of the comparison numbers. Pearland was not at that type of number some years back. Friendswood, much more established community, so not a surprising number there. But, look at the Iowa Colony situation as they're growing as well. So one more number, just for tonight. We always like to look at the age of the housing stock. So if you look at homes that were more than 20 years old, and again, going back to the 2000 census, about half of the homes in Manvel in 2000 were 20 years or older. Fast forward to 2022, it was getting closer to a quarter that were 20 or more years old. When we were working with Pearland in 2015, 90% of the homes in Pearland had been built since 2000, I believe it was at the time. So there were plenty of older homes, but with the numbers expanding like they had, a much smaller part was older homes. We dwell on this for one reason, that as homes get older, depending on the owners, their life situation, harder to maintain. So we're certainly thinking about new growth, new development, but we need to think about our existing development and how homes and other facilities are going to hold up. So look at the Iowa Colony number, 10.2%. Now we know there's a lot of recent growth there, not as much in the past, but then you see the spectrum once again, Friendswood and Alvin being more established communities. So these are also numbers that are interesting to track over time as you continue to grow and see how these change and what the comparisons are like. So as I say, we'll be bringing a lot more numbers like this to you as we do our work. So let me shift to the future and where we're going as we start this process. Another discussion point, Mayor, and as we say, this is one we can really open up, but it's a fill-in-the-blank one, and we usually ask for one word. Doesn't work very well, usually. I'll give you up to 3, but if you, at the start of this process, and very typically what you put in that blank changes as we bring information to you, as you hear from the community and your other stakeholders, but as we start this process, how would you fill in that blank right now as perhaps your top priority for these plans? And I should have put the S for these plans to address. The items below are just some prompts. Sometimes it's something that's been there a long time. It's an ongoing issue. We talked about things like drainage, or it could be something brand new that with your growth, it's an emerging issue. Another way, it could be, as some people have mentioned, a reason you ran for office, something that has been a priority for you that these plans need to address. And sometimes it's having served in these types of roles or on advisory commissions, what's some of the most difficult issues you face that these plans need to address. So Mayor, I'll leave it to you to wrangle some answers for us.
Absolutely. So we'll open it up, and I'd like each council member to weigh in here. What I'd start with is I'd fill in that gap and say, above all else, this plan must address quality of life.
Okay.
We can't protect people's way of life, but we can protect and hopefully improve their quality of life. That entails not just parks and amenities and trails and businesses. That entails the burden that our residents have to carry from a tax standpoint, from a fees standpoint. That takes into consideration a lot of those different metrics. Do their homes flood because of the new development that's coming in and the lack of improvement for ditches surrounding the development that's happening? So I think that statement is all-encompassing for a lot of different things.
And we will put Manvel's identity as another on the list.
Absolutely. We'll start with Councilman Opliger first.
Well, I think whatever it does, it has to make sense. Right? You can't just throw it out there and say, here's our report or here's our study, and it not make any sense at all, right? So it's, our data is very complex now. It doesn't, some of it doesn't make sense to a lot of people. So whatever you do, make sure it makes sense and it fits, right, in our personalities.
Fits Manvel, and strategic plan and comprehensive plan, things you can do fairly easily, short term, but things that you need to chip away at because they are difficult.
Well, see, yes, that's where the complexity lies, right? When you start throwing, we have we have zoning, we have the comprehensive plan, and the code of ordinances, all these different things, right? And it's very easy to throw a paragraph in there somewhere that is going to be a complete opposite of what we expected or desired. Right, and that's where it doesn't make sense, and then it takes a long time to go back and fix that that paragraph.
Thank you, Councilman.
That's good. Councilman Lands.
It's kind of a different way, maybe it's a different point, but trying to keep up with our growth is difficult because we are growing faster than we can financially keep up with, basically. I mean, we have this new wastewater treatment plant that we're bringing on that we have to have to keep ahead of the growth, or we're stagnant. We can't grow. So there are some big financial issues that we're faced with, and my viewpoint being that we're so small right now, but we need all of these big pieces of the puzzle to make it work. And how do we pull all that together, financially and everything else? And then my other concern, I guess, is, I am a 100% advocate for our police department. And we have to keep them strong. We have to keep them ahead of the wave. I don't want our police officers to be playing catch up. I don't want to see horrific situations in our town that we've seen elsewhere. And I think deterrence is, and just having what they need is important. And I know that's kind of pulling away from this a little bit, but as far as the structure of the town and the city and the growth, to me, that's a very, very important part. The strength of and the safety of our citizens and our police department.
If I may, Councilmember, not at all off subject. When we do our community surveys on these types of plans, public safety is typically #1 citizen issue. So it's something, even if it's not physical development and what these plans tend to deal with, as discussed, it's a factor that you got to work around, that's one of your more labor-intensive parts of an operation at a municipal government. That's always going to be there. You've always got to work around that #1 priority of public safety.
Councilman Acree?
Well, I think traffic is probably one I'll pick, and we've had volunteers on committees for well over 20 years planning for where we are today. And of course, we've learned with the problems Pearland has with 518, it grew up and then they're stuck with what they've got. It's a pretty big traffic jam over there most of the time. So we have, with the thoroughfare plan, what we were going to connect the east to the west side, which we're doing today. And of course, TxDOT's doing a lot of development over there, which is causing a lot of headaches to everybody, but that's typically going to happen. That's in a year, maybe 2, it'll all be passed and done. And it'll be a big improvement to moving around. Since Town Center is there, and we worked pretty hard for a pretty long time to see that HEB over there. And I'm probably more happy than anything to see Whataburger opening up here in about another, hopefully, couple of weeks. But it's not going away. It's there. So Harry says April, so I don't know if I agree with him. Anyway, so
I imagine it will have some traffic too.
Yeah, it will. It will have some traffic.
Especially from Councilman Acree, that's for sure.
Well,
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner, right?
yeah.
Coffee stop.
Yeah. Well,
So anyway, the fact is, Charlotte Street, which I live on, will go all the way through to Rodeo Palms Parkway. What do you think, Dan? Another year?
be a question for Manager Dan right there.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to find out soon when we get to the thoroughfare plan.
Yeah. So anyway, that'll open this up. And, well, I don't think Highway 6 is going to get less cars on it. You know, that's just seems to be getting more and more. But, I mean, I could pick other subjects, but traffic is a big deal, and I think we've addressed it the best we could.
Thank you,
Thank you, sir.
Councilman. Councilman Hudson?
Yeah, it's always tough.
My thing is, I know how I would like the city to be more open and let there be, you know, we have the population of seniors, and they're less to want a lot of change. And then you have the new 25, 30-year-old folks that has children and everything. I'm past that stage. I don't even want my grandkids to come over. So, but we have people with young kids, you know, and they're looking for a future. They're looking to put their roots in, and that is going to be a hard sell to some people. Like Mayor Dan, I mean, he got young kids, and another council member, the two have just left. They're going to deal with their children. And we have to put that into perspective and say, okay, we got to build that for them. Hopefully it won't be too hard of a sale. But future is there. I mean, you can't, I mean, people are moving here, and You know, there's certain things how can you tell somebody not to sell their land? And then whoever buy it, they're gonna put what they want in there. This is a profit-bearing situation. So I'll go from there. I'm open to a lot of things, you know, whatever it takes to allow the city to move and let it be logical and try to deal with the whole population of the city.
And what I want to do, Gary, as well, is I want to give our city manager an opportunity to weigh in here. One thing I'll add as well is this plan must address the needs of the people. I think the reason we sit in these seats, the reason why government exists is to serve the people. And I like how you've talked about that there's going to be surveys and forums and listening sessions and opportunities for people to engage in this process. Because if we sit here and just put words on a piece of paper or lines on a map that don't address the actual needs, then I think we will miserably fail. So that's a big thing for me. City manager, do you have anything that you'd like to add for this one? Things you'd like to see the plans address?
Well, just a big picture. So, you know, we had a comprehensive plan back in 2007 and then an update in 2015. And so the thing that has been constant, I guess, between those two plans and now is the number of people participating in that plan, right? So I don't know where we're going, but we're making good time kind of thing, right? So we're heading in a certain direction and we have more people to I guess, call on, you know, in our citizenry. And so that's an exciting thing because I've got 7 different folks with 7 great ideas, but that's just 7 of, you know, almost 20,000. So are we going to hit it perfectly? Probably not, because in another 5 years, we'll be having some of these same discussions, right? But that's okay. It's always been that balance since I've been involved with the city since 2008 is how do you keep the rural feel, but still addressing development? Because the more and more people that want to live here, that equals density. So what does that look like? And I think I've told you, you know, to limit it to a 60-foot wide lot, well, nothing about a 60-foot wide lot says equals rural feel whatsoever, right? So, exactly.
Members of the audience as well?
Is there anything else that you'd like to cover, or is this a perfect opportunity to see?
We are pretty much done, and I appreciate the opportunity to hear from council.
Okay. Well, one person I'd like to especially open it up to is our former mayor, Mayor Dolores Martin. Mayor Martin, is there anything that you'd like to add or see? And so for those who might not know, Mayor Martin was mayor for 8.
One thing that I sat here listening to what people were saying, and the one thing that I fought so hard to bring to this city was zoning, and that's something we should be so very proud of. And our citizens are proud of it because they know that a business cannot come next to their home. And I think sometimes we need to remember that, because when I was listening, not one person even said zoning. So do they not think it's that important? Oh, I think they can hear me. I think you can hear me.
Yes, ma'am. We use that to capture it for the live streaming that we're doing, so people online can hear you.
When I was on PD&Z, I realized how important it was, and people were concerned about their property and what was going to come next to them. And I fought very hard and long to bring zoning to the city of Manvel, which I thought is something we should be very extremely proud of, because we can direct what we want to happen where. And I think our citizens are far more comfortable that knowing that something is not going to come next to them that they don't want there. That was my only comment.
Thank you, Mayor. Absolutely. Zoning, we discussed that in a planning session that we had last week, where zoning is a very valuable thing. You don't want it to be too burdensome, but it's also valuable because it allows you to ensure that, you know, you don't have a refinery that's built right in the middle of a residential neighborhood, as an example. Would any of our other fellow board members or EDC members like to take a minute and add anything? I think there's going to be continued opportunities as we go along to engage our different boards and committees and the public. This is just a start, but it's important that we have a dialogue about this, and it's a collaborative approach. We have Mary Ann Atkinson, who's one of our board members. You got to use the microphone.
Hello, my name is Mary Ann Atkinson. We talked about the rural. Yes, the rural wants to be rural. Why can't we set up, not necessarily trails, but wildlife areas? I know we got the big park coming in, make that a huge wildlife area. We are a bunch of neighborhoods now, and you hear, oh, the coyote got my cat, or, there's pigs running through my yard. Well, because we're rural. But I'd like to see the forest also stay along with Manvel.
That's good feedback. Thank you, Mary Ann.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right, Gary, it doesn't look like we have necessarily anybody else. Can you talk to us, kind of wrapping this up, about next steps? Where do we go specifically?
Yes, sir. As I say, we are working with Brooke and staff to line out our engagement plans, and looks like it's going to start in late March and the first couple of weeks of April. And as part of that, there'll be a general public meeting, but also more focused meetings, literally focus groups, as we've talked about, and the survey process toward the end of that, so we can base the survey on what we've been hearing, because we like to use the surveys to try and validate that the many others that may respond to a survey that can't participate in person are sharing the same types of thoughts, or bring something else to the table that we didn't hear through the in-person activity. So that's next on the agenda. We'll be doing our background work in the meantime, but really the community conversation is what's coming up next. So we appreciate your time today. I will leave it with a couple of quotes that we like to use. I think this sums up some of our sentiment earlier, but as several people have said, we can put a bunch of words on paper. I've been doing this a long time. That's not what I want to do. We want to see results. We want to see communities grow and improve. So that's one thought. And the other one is this, on the management side of things, we can do plans, but it's what happens after the plans. And regarding the city manager's comment, I've been doing this so long, and hopefully I'm going to wrap it up soon, to where, we have to adopt these plans at a point in time. Yes, it was adopted November 2025, whatever, but the world keeps changing and turning. I hope we get to a point where comprehensive plans are much more strategic and much more organic. They're not just adopt it and wait 5-7 years and then we'll revisit it, that it's an ongoing process. So again, we will see you down the road, and we'll be talking to the community very soon.
Fantastic. Thank you,
Mayor.
Gary. Appreciate you
Council
being
members.
here. Dan, anything else you'd like to add, or we're good to go? Okay, so I think we have a PD&Z meeting next where we'll be swearing in a few members. We have a lot of people from the public here that are interested in the public hearings that are going to be happening based off of some notices that were sent out. So any other comments and or questions from council? Okay, hearing none, I will make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second from Mayor Pro Tem Hudson. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously.